In the bustling kitchen, as I washed dishes with my hands submerged in soapy water, Jacob's demand for tea cut through the noise sharply. "Hold on, I'm cleaning up," I replied, trying to convey patience. However, his response was laced with disbelief and urgency, pressing me to prioritize his request over the task at hand. Before I could protest, my mother-in-law, Mrs. Samantha, chimed in from the living room, requesting sweet coffee instead of tea, her tone equally demanding. Surrounded by an unfinished mountain of dishes, I felt overwhelmed by their commands. My name is Kinsley, a 26-year-old working mother caught in a challenging domestic situation. Marrying Jacob at 20, I envisioned a life filled with love and partnership, but reality painted a different picture. Living under the same roof as Jacob's domineering mother, following the passing of his father, I initially empathized with her loss. However, it soon became apparent that I was merely a tool in her manipulative control, expected to manage endless chores, work, and meet their unappreciative demands. Despite my efforts to maintain peace and fulfill my responsibilities, my work was either ignored or criticized. My attempts at cooking were met with disdain, and any attempt at dialogue was shut down with harsh rebukes. The dynamic in our home grew increasingly oppressive, with my presence barely acknowledged, turning my existence into a silent struggle for recognition and respect. In this environment, my 4-year-old son was my only solace, a beacon of happiness in an otherwise dim reality. Our living arrangement, a decision not of my making but imposed upon me, became a constant reminder of my constrained autonomy. As days passed, the harshness escalated, leaving me to navigate a life that felt less like a partnership and more like a solitary confinement within my own home. My existence, once slightly overlooked, had become entirely invisible over the years. As time marched on, Jacob and I aged into our early 30s. Our son matured, yet the heavy, unyielding atmosphere of our home remained static. My mother-in-law, now 66, seemed to find a twisted satisfaction in my discomfort. One weary evening, after a long day at work, it hit me hard. In their eyes, my presence was pointless. I was like a shadow, unseen and unheard, with the sole exception being the loving recognition from my son. The mere thought of losing this one connection was unbearable. Arriving home, I delved into cooking, attempting to dispel the heavy air with the aroma of mapo tofu, fried chicken, and a stir-fry of bell peppers and pork, hoping to inject a touch of normalcy into our dinner. But when Jacob coldly demanded the mayonnaise, offering no thanks or conversation, something in me snapped. It was a small request, yet it marked the breaking point of my patience. The situation deteriorated further when Mrs. Samantha, with a venomous tone, demanded I clean the bathroom right in the middle of dinner. My frustration boiled over at her inappropriate comment, leading to a heated argument. Jacob sided with his mother, insisting I apologize. For the first time in years, I stood my ground, refusing to back down. That night was pivotal. In the solitude of my room, my resolve solidified. I downloaded divorce papers, filled them out, and presented them to Jacob, my decision clear. His shock was evident, but I felt a calm determination. Announcing my intention to file for divorce, I finally felt as if I was stepping out from the shadows, ready to reclaim my life. The days that followed were filled with tension, cold stares, and sharp words, yet amidst the turmoil, I discovered a newfound sense of freedom. Serving dinner one evening, despite the storm of glares from Mrs. Samantha, I realized I'd begun a journey towards liberation and self-discovery, determined to build a happier, healthier future for myself and my son. As I served the meal, Mrs. Samantha criticized it harshly, claiming even a child could do better. I focused on my son's joyful expression, encouraging him to enjoy his favorite dish, despite Jacob's sarcastic remarks about my efforts to be a good mother. Their disdain was palpable, but I maintained my calm, emphasizing that I was simply trying to provide a pleasant dinner for our son. Mrs. Samantha's dismissal of me as a burden only added to the already tense atmosphere. Jacob's taunts grew more personal, questioning my ability to manage on my own post-divorce. I met his gaze firmly, reminding him of my role as the family's breadwinner and my confidence in caring for myself and our son. His smugness waned, replaced by a hint of doubt. Mrs. Samantha's interjection, underestimating my independence, led the discussion to our financial contributions, a subject they usually avoided. I pointed out the household's reliance on my income, a fact that seemed to unsettle them, especially as Mrs. Samantha claimed they could manage without my pity money. Jacob's silence, however, revealed his awareness of our precarious financial situation without my support. In the days that followed, their behavior swung wildly. Mrs. Samantha alternated between sweet-talking attempts to persuade me to stay and launching insults when her efforts failed. Jacob appeared increasingly unsettled, his confidence waning as the impact of losing my financial support became clear. One day, I accidentally overheard a disturbing plan between them. Jacob expressed panic over losing my financial contribution, to which Mrs. Samantha coldly assured him she had a scheme to make my life unbearable, ensuring I wouldn't leave. Realizing their willingness to manipulate and control to maintain their lifestyle was a jarring wake-up call, confirming the necessity of my decision to seek a better life away from their toxicity. Their indifference towards me and even our son was clear. Their motivations were rooted in control and financial gain. That night, as I lay in bed, a determined plan started to take shape in my mind. I resolved to confront them, not with words or petty squabbles, but in a way that would strike at the core of their pride and financial security. The following morning, I took the first step in my strategy. I reached out to a highly recommended lawyer known for her astuteness and determination. "I'm seeking a divorce, and I intend to ensure they receive not a dime more than what's fair," I explained to her. Her response, full of resolve, reassured me that we would leverage my role as the family's primary provider to our advantage. With each day, my determination only intensified. I began to meticulously document every instance of disrespect, financial exploitation, and even the minor grievances. It was time to flip the script, to make them accountable for their actions. As I compiled evidence for my case, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. For the first time in years, I was steering the course of my future. The gloom that had enveloped me was gradually being replaced by the light of a new beginning. As the divorce proceedings got underway, the household's atmosphere turned even more sour. However, my apprehension was slowly replaced by a firm resolve. One evening, Mrs. Samantha attempted to sway me with feigned concern, suggesting we abandon the divorce and reminding me of our family's ties. Her insincerity was palpable. Facing her, my response was steadfast. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you have treated me," I stated. Jacob, who had been silently observing, accused me of playing the victim. My reply was calm yet firm. I refused to be their scapegoat any longer. The conversation inevitably shifted to finances, with Jacob questioning my ability to support our son alone. I couldn't help but smile confidently, reminding them of my long-standing role as the family's main supporter. Mrs. Samantha's scorn was evident, yet her words no longer held any sway over me. I was aware of my value and the truth of my situation. Meeting with my lawyer again, we refined our strategy. She outlined our approach clearly, ensuring that we were prepared to navigate the forthcoming legal battle. I left the meeting feeling more confident than ever, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that I was fighting for a just and deserved future for myself and my son. We planned to highlight their financial reliance on me, a strategy pivotal for both the custody dispute and the division of assets. This realization bolstered my confidence. The law was in my corner, and I was braced for the fight. At home, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Mrs. Samantha's efforts to belittle me escalated. "You think you're clever," she sneered, accusing me of being heartless for leaving. I met her gaze squarely, my response firm. "No, I'm simply asserting myself." Jacob's venomous retort that I would regret my decision and couldn't manage without him only solidified my resolve. His intimidation tactics no longer affected me. As the court date approached, I diligently prepared, compiling financial records, documenting their derogatory comments, and gathering evidence of their neglect. Amidst this, my son's voice, tinged with uncertainty, broke through. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" His question, filled with innocence, prompted a deep protective instinct. Yes, sweetheart, we're gonna be more than okay. We're leaving for a brighter, happier life, just the two of us, I reassured him, his embrace tightening in response. That moment crystallized my conviction. I was fighting for our future. With the court hearing on the horizon, a mix of anxiety and resolve filled me. I was prepared to confront Jacob and Mrs. Samantha to put an end to their manipulative control and emotional torment. It was time to reclaim my autonomy and secure a serene, joyful future for my son. The courtroom symbolized not just a legal battleground, but a gateway to liberation and justice. As I faced them across the room, the sureness of the situation was palpable, yet my determination was unwavering. This was the moment of reckoning. This was the moment that would redefine everything. The courtroom setting was stark, the initial proceedings marked by a formal chill. Jacob's defense painted him as a dedicated father and husband, unjustly accused, while Mrs. Samantha portrayed herself as the aggrieved mother-in-law, slighted by an unthankful daughter-in-law. Yet their attempts to sway the court were unconvincing, their fabrications fragile under scrutiny. When it was my turn to speak, my voice was clear and composed. I outlined my role as the family's main financial support, highlighting the pressures from my husband's lack of employment and his mother's manipulative tactics. Jacob's attempt to counter, feigning injury and professing his support, was met with my direct challenge. Support, I countered, is demonstrated through actions, not empty words, and his actions were marked by neglect and mistreatment. The evidence I presented was compelling financial records, audio of their disparaging remarks, and witness accounts from neighbors familiar with their conduct. The undeniable truth of their behavior was laid bare as the presentation unfolded. Jacob's pretense started to falter, and Mrs. Samantha's feigned innocence began to unravel, revealing their true natures. The turning point came with the unveiling of indisputable evidence of Jacob's unfaithfulness and Mrs. Samantha's secret relationship with a well-off neighbor, Mr. Carter. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the images and documents were shown, irrefutably exposing their duplicity. Jacob's face drained of color, and Mrs. Samantha was visibly shaken, her outrage palpable as she accused us of violating their privacy. I remained calm. My response to Mrs. Samantha's outcry was measured yet assertive. The intrusion into their private matters was not the issue. The real issue was their actions and the impact of those actions on our family. The evidence spoke volumes, shifting the court's perception and paving the way for a verdict that would reflect the truth of our circumstances and my commitment to securing a better future for my son and me. The legal battle was intense, but it was a necessary step towards closing a painful chapter and moving forward with hope and dignity. I revealed the hidden truths about them, truths they had kept under wraps for too long. The judge had to restore order in the courtroom, but the impact was irreversible. Their reputations were damaged beyond repair, their deceptions laid bare for all to see. As the hearing wrapped up, the judge's decision was unequivocal. I was awarded full custody of our son, along with a just division of our assets. Jacob and Mrs. Samantha were left to face the consequences of their actions, their public images in ruins. Stepping out of the courtroom, I felt an immense burden lift from my shoulders. The prolonged period of manipulation and emotional torment was finally behind me. Standing my ground against those who sought to belittle me, I had triumphed. The most rewarding moment, however, was when my son embraced me outside the courthouse, his expression one of sheer relief and happiness. "We did it, Mom!" he exclaimed joyfully. "Yes, we did," I affirmed, holding him tight. "We're free now. This is just the start for us." As we walked away together, I realized this victory wasn't just mine. It represented hope for anyone who has ever felt diminished, powerless, or undervalued. It was a win for honesty and justice, marking the beginning of a hopeful and brighter chapter. The fallout from the court's decision was swift and dramatic. News of Jacob and Mrs. Samantha's deceit quickly spread, sullying their names within our community. Their once respected facade crumbled, leaving them exposed. In the aftermath, as I focused on building a new life with my son, A part of me took solace in knowing that Jacob and Mrs. Samantha were finally accountable for their misdeeds. One evening, as I was making dinner, an unexpected guest appeared. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Carter's wife, her eyes brimming with tears. "Kinsley, I've heard about everything. I can't fathom what Sylvia, Mrs. Samantha, has done," she shared, her voice trembling with emotion. I welcomed her inside and offered her a cup of tea. Sitting at the kitchen table, she shared her heartache, feeling betrayed by someone she considered a friend and neighbor. Listening, I offered comforting words, empathizing with her pain. The conversation was a reminder of the far-reaching consequences of deceit, not just within my family, but in the lives of others around us. Mrs. Samantha's actions had consequences far beyond what she had imagined. The next day, I ran into Jacob in town. He looked completely changed. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by a defeated demeanor. "Kinsley, can we talk?" he asked quietly, almost in a whisper. I paused, facing him. "What's there to talk about, Jacob?" He seemed lost for words, his gaze avoiding mine. "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't see how much I relied on you." "On your strength," he admitted. His apology, though belated, highlighted a significant shift in our dynamic. He had lost so much: his pride, his home, his family. It was only in his downfall that he recognized his mistakes. Mrs. Samantha suffered even more severe consequences. Her affair with Mr. Carter not only destroyed her social standing, but also brought legal challenges. Mrs. Carter had initiated a divorce and filed a lawsuit against Mrs. Samantha for alienation of affection. The neighborhood was abuzz with talk of Mrs. Samantha's predicament, painting a portrait of a woman overwhelmed by the outcomes of her own schemes. One day, I saw Mrs. Samantha in the grocery store. She seemed to be avoiding eye contact, rushing through the aisles. When we accidentally crossed paths, the disdain and despair in her eyes were evident. "You did this to me," she muttered as she hurried past. Watching her leave, I felt a combination of pity and justification for her situation. "No, Sylvia. You brought this upon yourself," I thought, realizing that their current hardships were the direct result of their own deceit and manipulation. Observing Jacob and Mrs. Samantha grapple with the aftermath, I understood that the truest form of revenge was simply living a good life, far removed from their negative influence. As I redirected my attention to my son and our fresh start, it became clear that this experience was not merely about retribution, but about emancipation, breaking free from the grip of abuse and dominance. Looking ahead, I felt optimistic. This journey wasn't just about overcoming the past. It was about stepping into a future brimming with possibilities, a testament to the strength found in liberation and the promise of brighter days ahead.